Hey, Nick. Sean Spicer. I understand there's some controversy brewing about how many subscribers you have on YouTube. You have more subscribers than anybody. And it's probably the biggest, largest YouTube subscription that anybody's had. But also, it's not numbers that matter, Nick. And I know everyone's going to quibble over this, but it's content. It's quality. And your subscribers are amazing. They're great. They're high quality subscribers, and that's really what you have to look at. Don't just focus on the numbers. I mean, if people are spewing a bunch of fake news, just don't get in the mud. They're amazing folks. Their engagement, the way that they like the videos. Anyway, I hope this puts this to the end. I hope that this controversy is over and we know who the real YouTube subscriber champ is, and it's you, Nick.
Oh dear, there we go. It's doing the auto thing again. There we go. Welcome everyone to Downtime. Thank you so much for joining us. And we've got so much to cover. First and foremost, you will notice that the goat is gone. And my condolences to a dear longtime friend who was ready to go to Sweden to burn the goat down herself. And I'm just sorry to say she lost the battle. The goat and his baby brother are home. They've gone back to 𝐍𝐢𝐜𝐴 or wherever it is that they wherever it is that they came from. The goat has survived this year, is now 19 out of 60 victories for the goat. Its odds are improving. I will say this, I feel like I cheated because, and I pointed this out to another friend, I was just like, yeah, the math is against me. The math is absolutely against me saying that the goat's going to make it. But I've been watching the fines get steeper and steeper as people get caught burning down this goat. And the last one got like 100,000 Swedish krona fine. Which I don't know how much that is, but it sounds like a lot. And 6 months in prison. And I'm sitting there going, next is going to be like felonies if they have them, and arson charges, and they've got guards. And they're like, I'm sorry. I think even the most dedicated person is going to sit there and say, the town's going to get this one. I don't think they're going to let this happen. I want everyone to know that I was very gracious in victory, as always. And I mean that, as always. I mean, I can't remember the last time I was wrong about anything. Nobody asked you. Nobody asked you.
I remain silent.
Okay, good. I do have a hand on the mute button. There's a reason that exists. But I did ask my friend how she liked her crow. I think she wanted it fried, deep fried. Yeah. I wouldn't know. I've never tasted crow, but I'm profoundly sorry that she was wrong again. I say again as if we made bets before. This is actually our first major bet, but I'm sure she's been wrong a lot. Just judging by her track record so far, she's 0-1. I mean, so. Anyways, thank you all for joining us. And yeah, Titan I don't have a mute button for, so that could be a problem. There could be issues with this show going forward. Ladies and gentlemen, we may have some technical difficulties. We'll see. At any rate, how you doing, Lance?
I'm doing pretty well.
That's good. So, Yeah, you and I were talking before this started. You know, the shine has kind of worn off of New Year's. I think once you have kids too, it's like, you know, you're like, no, I got to deal with the kids in the morning. I'm not staying up to watching the New Year, and I've done that enough times. Now, yesterday was a challenging day. I am, speaking of getting things right, I am delighted. It was just another one. We took a look at the evidence yesterday, and we said the FBI's. We could not justify the FBI saying that the guy in New Orleans was working with someone else. Like they can look all they like. It doesn't make any sense. So they have now admitted that it was just the one guy. He did come from the same base, is my understanding, as the guy in the the Vegas thing. And the other interesting thing about that is that does not look like an act of terrorism. He was active military duty. He had leave, and it looks like, and I think he was a Green Beret, so his special forces. It so clearly knew how to rig the car and could have easily done significantly more damage if he had wanted to. How and why he did this, I don't know. This is why you have no friends. Well, no,
But the thing to me is that it's just so strange, so oddly coincidental that the car breaks down right in front of Trump Hotel.
Well, I had assumed it was suicide. Do you think it was something? I mean, I assumed he detonated it on purpose, and you know, whether he meant to make a statement about it or not. Yeah, he went around it about an hour prior, and then he pulled up in front, and then the thing detonated. It was clearly designed to detonate. It had camping those camping canisters of fuel. It had gasoline, and it had fireworks, and they were all rigged to the battery. So it was designed to detonate the battery. That one's going to be a mystery. I don't know. We still don't. I mean, we're obviously following it on the Discord. I haven't done a deep dive before this show because this is usually downtime. This is usually much more chill, and we're not up to date on the. We're not doing the news stuff so much. But Trump is now going to be. Sorry, I'm having a hard time saying it. It just gets you right there every time. Trump is going to be not a civilian anymore pretty soon. And yeah, I don't know how to say that. So far, the FBI has said that the number one threat to the United States is far-right terrorist groups. It started saying that, I believe, in 2016, if I remember correctly. Far-right extremist terrorist groups. That was over ISIS, over terrorism, far-right extremist groups. Are we going to see more, do you think, attacks from the far right and or from the left? Any thoughts?
For the far right, possibly, because with him being in office, they may think that that's a green light to do whatever they want against minority groups that they dislike, that kind of stuff. But at the same time, they may just say, no, we don't need to do anything because we have the civil authorities are going to do the dirty work for us now. So who knows? Left wing, for lack of a better word, we'll call it counter-terror. Possibly, but I don't really think so because by and large, the violent left doesn't work in that manner. In this country, at least. So
I had read an article that said that the U.S. is not used to these kinds of attacks, and which is odd. It's true, but I find it interesting. You know, you go to anywhere in Europe, and they're like, do school shootings really happen in the U.S.? We're like, yes, unfortunately, they do, and we're used to them by now. As much as it feels like I shouldn't say that, we kind of are. And Europe looks at us like, how do you get used to a thing like that? Having said that, when you take a look at, I forget what was the French magazine where they had the massacre in the building a while back, and all those. I mean, there's and England has been dealing with terror attacks for a while. That's why they have all the cameras on every street corner, and I mean, it is a lot more of a surveillance state than you would think unless you've been there. So. The article I was reading said that Americans aren't used to this kind of attack, but it, in the author's view, was coming. Do you think we're starting to look at terrorism in the likes of, and what's his name? I would consider, like, on the left, what's his name? Oh my God, I always get his last name wrong. Luigi, I have to look it up. The guy who killed the United Health.
To me, that doesn't fall into a category of terrorism.
Okay.
Because terrorism is a movement or a national entity using violence to further political aims. These are largely individuals with some history of mental health problems engaging in random acts. Now, are they urged on by some of the propaganda that either side is spewing? Possibly, but it's not organized. So to me, it doesn't fall into the category of terrorism. And I think this is a good segue point for a topic you would want to talk about later on, which was stochastic terrorism. I wish I had the book with me down here. There's a quote from Lenin that he made at some rally early in the Bolshevik period, where he said, we need more terrorism. We don't need terrorism where we go out and deliberately attack the whites. What we want is agents who randomly attack people who are on that side. So there's no organization to it or predictability to it. That causes true terror. That makes people afraid. Because if it's an organized terror attack, then in some ways it becomes predictable and understandable and has less of a terror effect on people, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. I think while suicide bombing is not stochastic terrorism, I think one of the reasons it's so effective is because you never know what could blow up, and the targets were in fact chosen essentially at random. All right, so that makes sense. So we've seen. So you had said, so if we're going to say maybe the left is a little more stochastic terrorism, do you think we're going to see that on the left, or is I'll tell you this: what I see on the left is more like, well, oh look, I have an appointment to get my citizenship in Canada. Bye, and people.
There's going to be some of that, but I think in terms of reaction to a more extreme right-wing government taking power, you're likely, I think, to see more civil disobedience and acts of vandalism against big business or business owned by some big Trump supporter or whatever. I don't think you're going to see bombings and assassinations and such, at least not on an organized scale. Because for the most part, the left doesn't like being organized.
I think that's true. The left falls in love, the right falls in line. I think the left tends to be, the more liberal, the more creative. So it's like herding cats. I mean, that's every election is. Now, I did note yesterday, and I'm just curious as to your thoughts on, and we've discussed this before, I don't know. Trump tweeted out on the New Orleans, the car driving through Bourbon Street, he tweeted out, "This is what I was talking about," and everybody was, the Democrats said wasn't real, but, this is why we can't let immigrants into this country, ignoring the fact that the guy was born in Houston, Texas. And then he said crime rates and murder rates are at an all-time high. I know you know the figures, but I'm going to show you this anyway. This is homicide rates since the early, 11th century, all the way up to the present. We are not at an all-time high. And we had, I don't have for this show, but we had.
I doubt we're even at an all-time high for the 20th century.
Yeah, homicides have been going up. Violence overall is at an all-time historic low for the United States. So, will he or any of his audience ever care that he makes this shit up?
The true believers don't care. And in fact, to some extent, they are such true believers that no matter how absurd what comes out of his mouth, they will believe it as, Moses coming off the mountain with the tablets, truth.
You make it sound like a mental illness.
It is. I'm sorry, but it is. And it's a cult, let's face it, And I would argue cults are, to a large extent, a form of mental illness. It's people that, feel a compelling need for whatever reason to have somebody make all their decisions for them because they have so little self-esteem.
Well, yeah. I found myself reading that tweet yesterday, and I was just like, it was just lie after lie after, and it has to be lies. There's no way by this point he doesn't know that crime isn't, but he knows that he can say that. He knows that people will buy it. Yeah. So that's
the narrative that they've been fed for the past 2 decades.
And I'm wondering if that's one of the things that really pisses me off about him, which is I like having a pretty decent handle on what's going on politicians, on this or that. I've been wrong before, but I like having what I think is a pretty decent handle. And he's a tough one to get a handle on because you never know if he actually believes what the fuck he's saying or not. So you're like, okay, he's either crazy or, half crazy, or he doesn't care, or he does care about some things, but not about others. It's just like, you get a headache.
A quote from 𝐒𝐸𝐼𝐼 the Magnificent, one of the big Ottoman rulers, comes to mind, which was him famously saying, "If a single hair in my beard knew what I was thinking, I would pluck it out and burn it." And I think to some extent, not that he realizes he's operating in that way, but I think that is the way that Trump operates. He just goes off the cuff at any given moment, whatever pops into that rattling empty head of his.
Well, and that's why somebody pointed out that they figured out how to do meetings with him. If you have something on your agenda and other people are against it, be the last one to speak. Let everybody else go first, and then as he's leaving the room, say, "Oh, this is my idea." And he's going to say, "Okay, love it, great, do that." And it doesn't matter how much evidence was given contrary to it. It doesn't matter how many other good ideas were. It's the last one he hears that he's going to go with.
Yeah.
Wow. Who was that said about the beard?
𝐒𝐸𝐼𝐼 the Magnificent.
I don't even know who that is.
I think he's the one. comes to power shortly after the Ottomans take Constantinople. He's not the one who takes it. He's the one that floods into the Balkans, and you get that several hundred-year period where everything in the Balkans, from the lowest tip of Greece up to the borders of Austria and Hungary, those are all Ottoman possessions.
Is he the kind of guy that likes to play the fiddle while watching Rome burn?
No, he's very highly regarded, and not just because he expanded the empire, but also because he put so many reforms into effect, changing the judicial system, giving a lot more expanded rights and protections to minority groups and such. So he's a pretty all-round decent guy for the period.
Yeah.
No, he only impaled 10,000 people on the road back from, the battle of whatever it is.
Yeah. I wonder if 1,000 years from now they're going to look back on Stalin and say, well, for the period when you take Mao and you take Hitler and Poe and or Pot, sorry, Pol Pot, and it's like, yeah, he may have had higher numbers, but he what's his name? Who got the trains all to run on time? Mussolini, thank you. Yeah, Oh dear Lord! Yeah? Trump actually said that too. He said we're going to get the trains to run. I was just like, oh God, that's sort of like when Bush said we're going to have a lightning war in Iraq. I'm like, that doesn't that.
Bad choice of words.
Bad choice of words. It's like that does not translate into German well. That was the other one, Army of God, that he said, well, we've got an Army of God. I was like, yeah, that doesn't translate into Farsi well either. Oh my God. Okay. So, I was thinking we could talk about, what was it? Well, you had mentioned the PTSD. You and I had this conversation once a while back about the military, and you had said, in particular with pilots, it was very hard to get them to admit when they were having periods of stress, because that was seen as a sign of weakness. So they had to actually.
It was also because pilots are taught from early in their training to compartmentalize. So you take that problematic stress and you lock it in a little box in the back of your head, and you never open it again. But the mind being what it is, it starts seeping out at some point.
Well, and one of the reasons I bring it up is, again, this guy, active duty. It's shocking. So I'm sitting here going like, okay, it's only the second.
I've heard nothing that suggests he left any kind of note or treatise or what have you of why he did it. And so we can't really say whether it was stress or whether it was a political statement or it was just an accident and he happened to have all those inflammable things in the back of the car by sheer coincidence. Yeah, I know. I don't believe that one either, but
yeah, my understanding is it was rigged. It was rigged directly to the battery. That brings us to a couple of things. We've had on a couple of guests who've talked about, and this is a good show. We've had on Dr. X / Mr. Conspiracy, who has a PhD in philosophy, and his concentration was conspiracy theories, which I had no idea. I thought you had to pick something like epistemology, metaphysics, something like that. No, he goes conspiracy theory. So first of all, holy smoke, he knows conspiracy theories going back like 2,000 years. He was like, the ancient Jews had this theory. I was just like, wow. And he also said that
I'm sure there's a conspiracy theory behind why Vesuvius erupted when and where it did.
Yes. Which makes me wonder if, like, most religions are just conspiracy theories. It's like there's there's a guy there. His name is Yahweh, God of Abraham, and basically he just likes fucking with you. That's all there is to it. It would explain a lot.
I think there's for some people, there's an almost natural inclination to, rather than accept the obvious and simple solution of why something happened, and want to come up with some sort of bizarre, it was done by this person that I don't like, and here's how they managed to do it. And, it's pure Rube Goldberg to make it work.
Yeah. But I think that gets into what you said earlier about the difference between stochastic terrorism and terrorism in the normal sense. The reason stochastic terrorism is so much more frightening is because it doesn't feel controllable. The organization may not be controllable, but it's quantifiable. It exists. It's defined. Whether it's the Illuminati, whether it's Trump and his. I've said this before. I'm actually feeling.
It's like Bin Laden's organization or ISIS or whatever. You know who's doing it, so you can strike back at them. And pure stochastic terrorism, you have no idea who's behind it. So you don't really have a target to strike back at, and that leaves you feeling frustrated and vulnerable.
I think that's an excellent point. I think also it's just yeah. Well, no, I'm going to agree with you from a different way. I feel better about this Trump administration than the last one, and I think it's because this time at least I've got some idea of what to expect. We know what kind of institutional resistance can at least slow him down. We know it can be done. We know he's not invulnerable. He's at least been convicted. That conviction was upheld. I mean, he doesn't seem the Superman anymore, which is hilarious because he's a buffoon. He's an utter buffoon, but it seems like he is kryptonite to the U.S. legal system. I mean, it's just like he could literally go, Russia, could you please go hack Hillary's emails and release them? And like, isn't that a felony? Isn't just asking them to do that a felony? Did he just do that did ABC News
I don't think he's invented that. I think the ultra wealthy have been doing that for forever, gaming the system to make sure they're never touched. But he's so in your face up front with it that everybody's just left going, what the hell is going on? Why aren't people doing something to stop this lunatic? And it's opening eyes if people are wise enough to actually open their eyes and look at the larger picture rather than focusing exclusively on the orange shit given.
Sorry, I just got distracted.
That brain cell died.
yeah, that one brain cell I had that was working just sort of said, okay, it didn't die, but it was like, can we take a break for a minute?
Nap time.
I just need to catch my breath. It's that one brain cell. Well, I see that they're still, for some reason, fixated on the goat, and that's all right. It's sour grapes, I do understand. At least I've read about envy and a sense of shame and loss. I've read about these things in psychology textbooks, so I have some idea of what you must be feeling. For those of you who wanted to burn the goat, all I have to say is I did that one quick because downtime can actually be clipped. I got to remember, I can't do crazy stuff in here anymore because downtime can be clipped. It's not technically a news show. It's like, not technically a YouTube. I swear to God. My father did a lot of public defender work, and so I've always kind of loved the idea of a public defender. And I always I was always dismayed about the idea that a public defender just is no good. But that's the sort of consensus that
Hollywood will
everybody's.
tell you otherwise.
Yeah. Well, and I've done some digging, and I did find a highly qualified public defender. Just kidding. No, it's basically public defender work that I can tell is either people who are on the verge of retirement and don't care, they just need the paycheck. They do have experience, but they're like too old to really be that effective anymore, and they're overworked. They don't have the hours, and it's just sort of like, we're going to plead you out. Yeah, but I didn't do it. Yeah, but if you plead that you did do it, you get free meals for the next 6 years. So.
I think the issue is that there's no upward mobility in public defender career track, because when you get people off, only that person's family is celebrating. Whereas if you're in prosecutor's office, anytime you take some guy who's been in the news, even if it's just for holding up a service station or whatever. Now people, oh, Prosecutor Bob, yeah, he's a good guy. And then you can run for public office, or, you get enough brownie points, you can start moving up the ladder. And I think that's one of the reasons is you get people who kind of bottom out in the regular fields and they get shuffled into public defense because nobody cares if they succeed or not.
Yeah.
Including them.
Yeah. So, and the reason I bring this up is because you were talking about Donald Trump, and it's like, I don't think anybody wants to prosecute him, because even if they have the evidence dead to rights, he's going to do what he always does, which is delay, and it's going to cost the government. And as a prosecutor, you have a budget, and you have to put X number of criminals away for that budget, or else they're going to replace you with somebody else who can put away that many or more. And that the win-loss ratios count. So Trump can literally do these crazy things, and people are like, who's going to prosecute him? You're going to lose your job if you prosecute him. So so this got me thinking about...
The other part is, he is vindictive. So if you're the prosecutor, he's going to go out of his way for basically the rest of his life to squash him with the vote. Yeah.
And I can't believe that our own Justice Department can't really defend its prosecutors. I mean, I don't know that it can't yet. And I don't know. This was a tough one because Biden was talking about unilaterally pardoning everybody on the January 6th committee. And 𝐒𝐚𝐦𝐚𝐫 said no. Said, absolutely not. Do not pardon me. I've done nothing wrong. And everybody acknowledges, no, we know you've done nothing wrong, but he's vindictive. He will find something. He will invent something, because that's all he fucking does anyway. All his tweets, everything he's ever said is just invented shit. If he happens to be right, it was luck. I mean, a stop clock is right twice. He sometimes says shit that's actually true. It's bizarre.
The point is, I think, that even if you pardon somebody for the January 6th committee, he's still going to find something to dredge up in some other field to get you. So it's best to just leave it alone, because then you at least have a defense that, no, it was a duly constituted and appointed legal proceeding.
That's a very fair. You don't want him to send like 20 investigators, private investigators going into your life. That's a really good point. Just go after what what Kinzinger had said, and is a great ideal, and I agree with him idealistically, but I'm sitting there. This is where, and we've had this discussion before, this is one of Zendering's favorite topics to talk about, which is, where do your ideals meet with, practical reality? And he said, listen, pardons are for people who've done something wrong. I haven't done anything wrong, and if you pardon me, it makes it look like I did something wrong. So I didn't ask for pardon.
It used to be, they may have changed it. It used to be you had to have been convicted of a crime to get a pardon. You couldn't just get a blanket, get out of jail free card. And and often people wouldn't accept the pardon because doing so was an admission of guilt.
We've done blanket pardons. I mean, I think Nixon was pardoned for anything he may have done related to the Watergate scandal without having to admit anything, and he hadn't even been indicted on that. They just didn't even bother indicting him once he got the pardon. That started the process. I think that was the first preemptive.
That's the slippery slope.
Yeah. So, is there? You had mentioned before, and I think it's funny because you and I have been doing the show for a long time. It's the first time I'd heard you say this was not that long ago. I thought this was an interesting statement. Laws are there to protect the rich. And there was a time before Gideon, you didn't have a public defender even, and Gideon, they just said, okay, there is a non-enumerated right in the Constitution that you have the right to an attorney, which was an improvement, but we just talked about public defenders. So how do you improve the upward mobility? Did it start going down with Reagan and there's no way to reverse the trend, or?
I don't know this for a fact, but my impression is that a lot of people get into prosecutor office because they either want to establish a legal record that they can then use to catapult themselves into a political office, or use that record to get signed on as an assistant or what have you at some large legal firm that will pay a lot more.
Yeah.
You don't find a lot of people who stick around in the prosecutor's office for their entire career. There are some who will go in and out several times.
So, yep.
That I think is the key, is you have to have some sort of sense in the legal community that public defenders are doing valuable and good work and deserve to be remunerated when they go into private practice accordingly, based on the skills they have acquired defending people. Which to me makes sense because, let's face it, most lawyers are basically handling a defense of something. I mean, some, the suits, that kind of stuff, or hostile takeover actions, that sort of thing. But even there, you still have to watch your flank, so to speak. So, yeah, go ahead.
Well, you still have to make an argument and defend it. Again, my father was a lawyer, and I'm. This may come as a shock, but I'm slightly argumentative, and I tend to choose my words carefully, and it's because if you didn't at the dinner table, you got skewered real quick. So I've noticed you do the same too. You say, "Well, I don't know, but," just like that's unfortunately that's sort of like one of the qualifications for in time. I was watching with a friend of mine. I was watching some other show, and they're like, "Well, this is happening, and this is happening, and oh my God!" And I was just like, "Yeah, you wouldn't work on our program." First thing we say is, "We don't know. This is just what it looks like to us, and we're a couple of guys throwing this shit together."
You remember the time we dissected, what was that commentator's name?
Peter 𝐍𝐤𝐜𝐴n, I think it was.
Yeah, 𝐍𝐤𝐜𝐴n, that's right.
Yeah.
And we both agreed that factually, a lot of his stuff was at least, if not entirely supported by the evidence, but made a convincing argument with the evidence, and it was decent stuff. But we both didn't like him because he came off as so absolutely cocksure about everything.
Yep. There was no room for I could be wrong if there's almost always if there isn't a caveat to how things could go wrong, you're not looking closely enough.
That happens because 𝐍𝐤𝐜𝐴n was, and a lot of people like him, come from an academic background. And in academia, you're constantly having to fight with not just your superiors, who are the ones that you're going to debate about defending your thesis, but also your peers, because everybody's trying to get, friendly with and the support of the professor. And he can't do that to everybody, so you have to find a way to make Bob over there look bad while you look great. So everything has to be spoken with utter surety, because if you show any amount of doubt, then, you're weak, we can get you now. Mm-hmm. Conversely, I think in fields, I think to some extent, like, the military or business, you kind of want to hedge your bets, because you understand that if something goes south, the ramifications are going to land squarely on you, unless you have done something to point out that, well, I think we have an 80% chance, but that still leaves 20% chance that it's not going to work.
Yeah. I don't know. I just imagine the head of Putin's military right before the invasion of Ukraine. Oh, it'll be 3 days, sir.
3 days, sir. We'll be dancing in Kiev, having champagne and. Yeah, right.
Before we start, sir, have you ever heard of Potemkin? Just asking for a friend. Speaking of, so we've now brought up lawyers, professors, so we now have the Reverend Dr. Professor Christopher Mowdy, Esquire, in the live chat. Thank you for joining us, sir. You have to bring up all of those in order, or else he doesn't show up. But good to see you. Yeah, the practice versus the theory. Well, and in scientific research too, like when you're doing research, they get a lot more hesitant about making claims, and the reason is because you've got the peer review process. If you present a paper and I got all of it. I think I did. I actually think, I don't know how I did that. You've got the peer review process, and if it's humiliating if you get something wrong. The most famous of them was, of course, and he wasn't even humiliated. He's whatever happened to Marty might actually know this. The guy who faked the paper on the polio vaccine causing autism. The guy faked the paper. And has since gotten into a good deal of trouble, but I don't know. All right. Well, so let's.
Soon he will be redeemed.
Oh, that's right.
Because,
he was.
Everybody in Center for Disease Control is going to say, "Oh yeah, he's prophetic."
I don't. That's. Please don't make me cry before the end of the show. We got like this far through the show without me breaking down and crying. I was going to say something. I was just realized. Okay, that was just say. Okay, I'd have let the goat burn if it meant we could take RFK off. And I'm hoping. I was going to say. I really think. Speaking of the things that we know and don't know, I really think that they're not going to approve him because I think there are enough Republicans who have some idea of how vaccines work and that they're important. But I don't know for certain. At this point, I am not putting anything past.
We live in interesting times.
Oh God, I know. Don't say that. You'll summon a Xander and he'll. That does bring me, though, to an interesting, because we've talked about stochastic terrorism sort of on the left, and I know the two aren't necessarily the same, but I think the left tends to be more that way. Anthony, oh dear Lord, now I got to get Anthony Mangione. Anthony Mangione. He is the man who has now been indicted, murder one, for killing the CEO for United Healthcare. Now, I will say this. Mowdy says this a lot, and this has become sort of one of my favorite phrases. Human beings are messy. Human beings are messy. We have emotions. We do things that we don't always understand why. We do things that we later regret, but we can be defined by. We can and we don't make a lot of sense a lot of the time. That's just human beings in general. So we like to think of ourselves as reasonably ordered, logical. No, human beings are messy. Here's this kid who looks like could be a genius. He graduated, I think, cum laude, went to an all-boys prep school, a valedictorian there, and appears to have planned this thing to a T, knew when and where the guy was going to be roughly, stalked him, had a getaway plan that got him getting away from the cameras, and so that he could go away. And everything makes sense to that point. Then he gets caught with the gun, which for me, the only reason to use a so-called ghost gun, a printed gun, is it's not traceable. It's not traceable. That's the whole point. There's no serial numbers. There's no nothing. You cannot trace the manufacturer of the gun. So the only way they could trace it is if they caught you with it. I mean, all he had to do was drop it like under the seat in front of him on the and then he got caught with all the fake IDs, which that I get, because if he's trying to, maybe he wants the fake IDs, but he gets caught with the gun after everything. And then he's got a 2-page manifesto he appears to have written on the train. So he's planned this whole thing, and then after doing it, he says, "Oh, shit, somebody might want to know why I did that." And then starts madly writing his manifesto. This is a valedictorian at all boys prep school.
Retroactive justification for murder.
Which does go to your point about the left being a little more disorganized. just saying. So a lot of people have been saying conspiracy theory here on that. He was actually maybe trying to get caught for any number of reasons. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this? That is one thread that still bugs me, is that he got caught with the gun when it would have been just there wasn't a trash can on the way to McDonald's. I mean, he needed like a McRib sandwich so bad. He's like, "Oh wow, it's a limited time. If I don't get over there in 5 minutes, I'll throw the gun away later." I mean.
And then forgot he had it in his pocket.
Yeah. He's ordering the McRib. Like,
for 2 days.
Yeah. So any thoughts?
I've talked to a lot of combat veterans, and most of them say the first time you actually kill somebody in combat, it has a profound effect on you. The more you do it, the less effect it has on you, supposedly. You get accustomed to it and numb to the guilt that goes with it. But I think he didn't consider what his reaction to actually shooting and killing the man would be. And after the fact, I think he got rattled and started trying to do stuff to justify it, to cover it up, to hide himself, and none of it was logical because he was so flustered by it. I think that had an influence. I'm not saying that's the only cause, but I think that had an impact of significant proportions. I think also he wanted to make some sort of statement, because I suspect he was being called out when he was at school. You're just another rich boy kind of thing. So he had to show that he was one of those good guys. He was a good people. And how do you do that? Well, you take out one of these horrible corporatists. So I think that may have been a motivating factor. I don't think it's a plot. I don't think there's some conspiracy thing behind it. I think it's just one mentally unbalanced loony just doing what he did for whatever reason that made sense to him, but makes no sense to any of the rest of us.
I did a writer's workshop for a while, and one of the best writers in the workshop had wanted to be an artist, wanted to be a writer and a painter all his life, got drafted into Vietnam. The luckiest thing happened. He was assigned to guard a hospital. He was there for 2 years, didn't shoot his weapon once, was never shot at once, because the VC would actually go by and he would see we'd see like all the just marching VC coming by, but they knew the hospital would also treat the VC. The hospital would treat anybody. So there was no, nobody would mess with the hospital. So he was but he still had his flak jacket fully on, the whole 9 yards. His buddy never had his flak jacket on, or he always had it on. It's hot as hell over there, so he just had it open the whole night. There was an airport right next to the hospital, and the VC were always trying to take it. And you could always tell when there was about to be a battle, because again, they would literally watch on the road all the VC going by, and they're sitting there. He's like, "You're an American soldier." They know you're an American soldier. They know you can see them. They can see you, and you're just like, "What happens if?" He goes, 2 days before going home. They all go by, and then there's one straggler, just one, and he is high on something. Who knows what, but he's all antsy giddy, and then he's trying to get up, but he's confused, he's this, that, sees the hospital, decides he's going to take it all by himself, and rushes the hospital, starts shooting at it. Hits my buddy's friend, my buddy opens fire, kills the guy. Now, my buddy's friend made it, but he wrote a story about this incident. He wrote the story about, he ended up, after he was done, he was supposed to go to bed, but they had to do the duty of picking up the bodies, and he, of course, knew where the body was. And then he had to go through for intel, so he went through and he found a picture of this man's family. Now, if he had not pulled the trigger, he'd be dead. If he had not fired, he would be dead. But that didn't, and so this is one of the reasons why when we talk about Putin, I always bring up, and you see me, and I bring this up, he has killed people with his bare hands. It takes, my buddy had to shoot or he was going to die. And he still never recovered, ever recovered from that. Putin, I don't think it phases him in the slightest, ever. I don't think it ever has.
The brings to mind, I don't know who it was. It was either Dan Rather or Walter Cronkite or somebody. He interviewed Ayatollah Khomeini shortly after the revolution had taken Iran and he'd come to power. And he said he was the only person in X number of years of journalism that actually frightened him. And he said it was because when you looked at the man's eyes, there was no soul there. It was like looking into the black eyes of a shark or a snake or something. There was no human being in there. And yeah, I think there are people who, can kill others without feeling the slightest qualm. But I think most people, it's a tough act.
And you and I have interviewed Starsky, I think 37 times. We've got the shows all numbered, and talked to Viper. You've talked to a lot of men who've been in combat. For me, it's a reasonably new thing. But I have noticed, even with Starsky, who has a spectacular sense of humor, and has developed even a sense of humor about, his job. You can also tell, this isn't what he as a human being would have chosen. He's dealing with it, and he's very proud.
To me, the lack of specifics. They'll talk about it in general terms, but they won't get very specific with you about it, because doing something with that level of specificity brings up all those memories dredges them out of whatever deep corner you hid them, and you re-experience them, basically. And they don't want to do that. They've come to terms with what happened and what they had to do. So, yeah. And it's interesting because I'm sure PTSD would have been far more severe back in, say, the Middle Ages or the ancient world, because then when you were killing a man, you were literally feeling the life going out of his body as you stabbed him. And nowadays, you know, you're firing at hundreds of yards, or in the case of artillery, miles, in the case of aircraft, you know, how many tens of thousands of feet up there. And you don't really have any sense of what you're doing. And I know a couple of pilots who talked about when they went and saw some of the places that they dropped ordnance on, they found it very disturbing to see exactly how destructive the stuff they were doing was. Because up until then, it's just, you know, kind of this, oh, this tiny little rose blooms down there.
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious, and I think we'll wrap this up in a second. Although actually, I'm going to ask you a terribly unfair question. I don't know if anyone can even remotely begin to guess. There have been subtle hints in every direction, which is what is 2005 going to portend for Ukraine. But before we get to that,
25, not 2005.
20. Listen, I got the brain cell back on the wheel. It's moving. Just don't mess with it, okay? Just let him go.
To drink. It'll be fine.
Do we have any 𝐒𝐸𝐴, Tom? Yeah. Okay. I think we need that. No, she's back in my DMs giving me a hard time about the goat. She's a sore loser, that one. Yeah, I know. Oh, don't worry about it. But we'll sort it out. All right. Anyways, so the drone combat it's like playing a video game, and there have been movies, and I know you've seen these movies where it's like somebody gets into the thing and then they go and they're actually in a robot and the robot's out killing other robots and or just people, and then the robot gets killed and you jack into another robot and there you go. And it kind of looks like we're headed that way. That's kind of where drones are. And I've seen, I did want to ask Viper this question. I didn't get a chance to ask him how many people he had. And we've seen this because we had this with I've forgotten his name, but he was the volunteer from, I want to say, Italy, who was in Ukraine, but he was training people, and he's like, they literally had people who's like, oh yeah, I maxed out on Call of Duty 2, so I'm ready to go. It's just like, he's just like,
there you are.
Okay, you see that big open space over there? We want you to head that way and just keep going until you get to the other side. But it's actually, there's almost a little truth to it when it comes to drones. And one of the things that I've heard is that they're looking for younger pilots because they have more experience with the kind of controllers, you know, the Xbox controller. And I'm sitting there going like, I don't know how I feel about, and at some point, if a 16-year-old is better at the Xbox controller for a drone than an 18-year-old, they'll take the 16-year-old.
They're going to conscript it. Yep.
So you're going to have 16-year-olds seeing little things, go, oh, there's a guy. Oh, I winged him. I'm gonna come back, and oh, he shot down the. Okay, another drone. You know, and wow. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's something to be said in that direction. Have you ever read the book or seen the movie Ender's Game?
I've seen most of it, and yeah.
The premise is interesting because they put these kids, because they figured out that the younger you are, the more malleable and pliable your brain is to learning stuff. And they turn them into super strategists and tacticians. And they throughout the training program, they're telling them, no, these are just simulations. Once you graduate, we'll send you into real action against the real enemy. And the authorities say, right at the end, okay, this is your graduation exercise. I want you to go out there and do your best. It's almost unwinnable. We know you're really good. You may be able to get the top score. And they succeed. And it's only then that the adults reveal to these youngsters, probably the last 2/3 of all these training missions you've been doing, you're actually controlling robotic combat vehicles to prosecute the war. And people are on these ships and they're dying, and the kids don't really understand or know about it. And then it really sends some of them into mental shock when they realize it. So I think we're going to see the same kind of thing if that ever develops. And I suspect some of the people that are flying these drones even today are going to start having to come to terms with, what they've been doing for the past 2 years. And there's always a price to pay. There is a reckoning.
Well, I mean, I think it's just a different take on survivor's guilt. I think it's the flip side of survivor's guilt. Why did all my platoon die and I made it? It's like I have no extra right to be here, but for the grace of God. And again, that was one of the things my buddy was struggling with. That's going to be an interesting topic for a show, because I think survivor's guilt is an underestimated phenomenon.
And it's not strictly combat. There was a case of a smoke jumper, who fights wildfires in backcountry. And he went in with his team of, I think it was 15 people or something, and they miscalculated, and the firestorm swept over and killed everybody but him, because he was the only one that followed the training and protocol and stayed where he was, knowing the fire was coming, and sheltered himself under his I don't know, asbestos blanket or whatever, his fireproof blanket. The others were all running, and the fire caught up and killed them all. And eventually, the guilt caught up with him. He committed suicide. So, yeah, that kind of thing happens, and it's a powerful guilt trip.
We'll have to get somebody, maybe a Professor Reverend Esquire. So we'll see if we can find somebody, because I think and it's not just. I think you just hit the example. It's not just combat. The survivor's guilt is a remarkable thing, and I think most of us experience it at some point, whether we can label it or even understand what it is or not. It's the part of it, I think, stems from the understanding that all of us have lost something at some point that mattered to us. So we all share that in common. We all share in common an understanding of grief, of loss. And then when we end up, for reasons that we can't fathom or determine, end up on the other side where we have, quote, won, but other people are suffering a grief and a loss that we can empathize with and understand, and we can't comprehend how and why we're on one side and they're on the other. It's a very powerful. I mean, so for example, when one person says, "I'm going to burn that goat down," and you say, "No, the goat's going to be fine," I personally, I mean, I always knew the goat was going to be fine, but I had to do the callback. It was getting too serious. I was right about the goat. People live with it. What the ban button is for. All right. Any thoughts on Ukraine before we go? Is there any way to predict what's going to happen, or is Trump just too much? And I don't think Trump cares right now. He's got a million other things on his mind.
Yeah, I think it all hinges on what comes out of Trump's excuse for a brain over the next 3 to 4 months. I don't think we'll get any real policy before then. I think he'll still be settling into, how he's going to run things and making sure his staff and cabinet are doing the things the way he wants and getting rid of the disloyal people. That'll take him a while.
All right. Well, thank you once again, Lance, for fritting away another hour with us here on Downtime. For those of you who are here, hopefully by this point you guys have figured out this is our second channel. It was unfortunately demonetized. We're down for a while, but we're getting it back on the watch hours. We do have After Dark, which is our call-in show. I think we're not going to do that for a while because I seem to have gotten on the last nerve of more than a few people in our live chat. I don't know why. I'm a nice, friendly guy, and but apparently some of them just think that something was directed at them. This is narcissists, all of them. At any rate, that probably didn't help. At any rate, so we won't do a call-in show until the live chat is a little less hostile. But I hope you guys had enjoyed yourselves for this Downtime. In Time will be on its regular channel on Tuesday, and we will, of course, follow any breaking news. So far, one day without breaking news. Let's hope we can get through the day without it. I'm going to be displeased if we have breaking news every day for a week of the first year of. So let's not do that. To go to live, I didn't want to have to go to breaking with that one, but I would have. So thank you all for joining us. And if you like these kinds of conversations, again, share with your friends. That's actually really one of the best and easiest things you can do to help out, especially this channel. We're not monetized. Hit the like button and share. We really appreciate it. Come check us out on the Discord. We're talking about this and a lot of other topics. And once again, Lance, thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you have a good rest of your week.
Thank you. Take care.